almost on the air.
All right.
All right, I am on the air. I know some of you might have been twiddling your thumbs for an hour, wondering what the hell's happening. But we finally have the author of Coonflakes, um, Cory Alexander Haywood, and we're gonna talk a little bit about all the craziness, both the pandemic and the race-demic. I don't know what else to call it, with dollar sign BLM, which is what I call it. Um, Obviously, we live in different states. You live out there, on the West Coast. I live here in the Midwest. Have you seen basically your life change much in terms of like what changed it more? Was it the lockdowns or was it the, whatever the fuck's happening with the cops and the protesters?
A combination of both. Here's the thing, man. Living in California, especially Los Angeles, where there are so many quote unquote progressives who live in the area, um, they have a particular knack for being manipulated by the media. And so they watch television and they're told that COVID 19 is the second coming of the Black Plague. And so people still are treating it as if it's a deadly disease that they can catch at the drop of a dime. And of course, our mayor, who I think is soft as cotton, is still pushing this narrative to scare people into either staying inside or even if we go out, you can see people, they're wearing masks. They'll shoot you a dirty look if you're not 6 feet away from them. It's like it's a really bad movie. That's what it feels like over here right now. Of course, the governor, uh, Mr. Gavin Newsom, it looks like he has no intention of reopening the state as he originally said he would at the start of the month. And in fact, many of us believe that we'll be shut down again very, very soon. They already started with the bars and the beaches and hiking trails and things, and I'm assuming that in very, say the next couple of weeks, we'll be going through shutdown all over again. So it's exasperating to say the least. And my personal view, I think it's highly overblown, and I think there's more to it than what it seems, at least on the surface. It being a political and election year, I think that has something to do with it. And then also, I think this whole pandemic is being used, as a weapon ultimately to get Trump out of the White House. Now, you probably asked him, how can I make an association between a disease that originated in China and Donald Trump? Well, it seems like Democrats are politicizing what's happening right now and blaming Trump for it, as if he was responsible for eating bat soup in China and brought it here. And so they've been blaming him for this pandemic for the last 3 months, hoping that the public will listen and ultimately hold him accountable for it. And they're hoping that it will result in him losing the election in November to Joe Biden, which I still think is unlikely because Joe Biden is obviously, he's just not the right guy for the job. I won't be mean. But I think all of this is interconnected. And it's blowing my mind. Let me just tell you that.
So yeah, we're talking to Cory Haywood. You can see his book cover is on the thumbnail, so just put it in the front. So obviously you've had a bit of a development in terms of your viewpoints. What do you think? Like, have people started treating you differently? Because I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I spoke to you. You weren't exactly a conservative. You were more like, I guess, a free speech person, sort of like did a lot of provocative articles and, you know, black oriented media. But have people started treating you like more hostile or more at arm's length because of some of your viewpoints changing or
Yeah,
maybe developments?
close friends, and some family. Yes, I intentionally keep my political views and affiliations um, hidden when I'm in public because people these days they don't really know how to communicate, in a peaceful way when they're discussing politics. And I choose not to get involved because quite often emotions run high, and then conversations devolve into shouting matches. I'm not about that. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself a conservative completely. Um, I still there are certain issues that I have completely liberal sort of views on, and so it just depends on the issue. I would say for the most part I'm conservative, but then again, black people have always been conservative. We don't even know it. In terms of, and I won't go into it too deeply, but I can say this: I come from a religious family, right? In fact, I come from a church-going home. My mother's a devout Christian. I'm a Christian, always have been. So religion is very important to our family. Education is important to our family. Obviously, family, the family structure, right? Keeping that together and knowing the importance of having a strong nuclear family, that's important to me as well. These are concepts, right, that conservatives support. And black people historically have supported these ideas as well. So we have historically been conservative. It's just that over the past, I would say, few decades, we've been manipulated to think that we aren't. But generally, when I interact with people, I try to stay away from politics.
Well, I think like unfortunately they've made. I mean, I was trying to talk about it like when we had the comms issues, but I think apparently I wasn't being heard anyway. But I was getting into this issue of every single facet of society becoming political, and the people that really started to notice it the most. I don't know if you remember this. Maybe I don't know if you're into video games, but a lot of these gamers were talking about gay characters being inserted into video game journalism becoming all about judging the game based on political stuff and not on user experience and on the entertainment of the game. And it became like this for everything. So now you're seeing the same thing regarding auto racing, regarding things that you would never seem to believe could become political and racial. And you spoke about your religious experience, at least within the family. And I have the same issue where, traditionally a lot of my viewpoints, I wouldn't say are conservative. Certainly, I believe in legalizing drugs and I don't necessarily believe religion should govern medicine, but the whole thing with the chromosomes and the transsexuals and everything, I'm Jewish, and there was a rabbi on the campus a few miles from me who told me that he's getting these transgender people coming to his events, and he has to sort of dance around the issue of whether gender identity can be basically hammered down using Torah concepts. Not, when he said that to me, I said to him, "Look, you're there. You're supposedly an authority figure, right? But you're letting these people basically bully you into, you know, suppressing your own viewpoint, and eventually you're going to be absorbed by the rest of this blob of academia and people who just want you to think the same." And he agreed with me, but he doesn't have an option because otherwise I believe they can just kick him off campus if he doesn't acknowledge a lot of this crap.
Right. Well, absolutely. We live, and I know this term has been used over and over again. It's cliche, but this whole cancel culture, right? This era we're living in, where someone um, who articulates thoughts or views that don't coincide with the majority, that person is, in today's time, is pretty much wiped off the face of the earth socially. It's crazy that someone in your friend's position, right, who has certain religious and moral views and standards, can't exercise those views and those standards in fear that he might be fired or removed from his post. That's ridiculous. They speak about democracy, Democrats and liberals. They speak about democracy and free speech, freedom of expression, but when they're presented with ideas they don't agree with, all of a sudden, free speech is out of the window. And that's really what drives me in the content that I write, is because a lot of it I could probably write in a way that is less controversial, right, and less irreverent. But I write the way that I do because I'm intentional about it. I want to force people to look at themselves in ways that they may not be comfortable doing. And the only way to do that, particularly in today's time, is by ignoring the sensitivity and the sensibilities of people. Right? I believe in being politically incorrect because that's the only cure for this disease of just ridiculous sensitivity that's sweeping the nation. And so that's why I speak the way that I do. In terms of religion, I don't think that religion should be pushed on college campuses anyway, because it's a very divisive subject. Um, and really, in addition to that, like you mentioned, transgenderism. You mentioned, other forms of sexuality. And my thing is this: if you're an adult, then I encourage you to do whatever makes you happy. Whatever makes you happy, whatever gives you a sense of fulfillment, that's perfectly fine. What I have an issue with are these ideas being pushed on our children, right? The fact that these children are being dogmatized from the time they're in kindergarten. That's what I have a problem with. We are essentially raising a generation of kids who will grow up to be very confused adults because they're constantly being bombarded with conflicting ideologies from both sides. And that's a problem. When you have children who are extremely malleable, right, and easily sort of manipulated, it's important that they be exposed to a consistent set of beliefs and ideas. Because if they are presented with too many things at one time, their brains won't be able to process it all efficiently. And that's why you have so many young kids now confused. You have them lashing out emotionally. You have them lashing out, and publicly. You see these riots and these protests. They're full of kids who are ultimately confused about who they are and about their purpose in life.
So,
And that's
so,
the
uh,
problem.
so like along those lines, we've seen, there's like a huge division between the reality that is on the small screen, on your TV or on, if you're watching cable or whatever, and the way that people are actually living. And I find that out usually, I know you live in California. I don't know how common it is to go to a gun range, but I went to one this week and I've gone to ones over the past 5 or 6 years. And the notion that at these gun ranges, it's all a bunch of like hill rods who barely can, keep a mouthful of teeth is like completely false. Like at every single gun range in Ohio, I can tell you that I've been to, I've been me and the people that I go with are usually the only white people. It's usually a lot of black people and maybe some Latinos. Now, do you think that this whole episode with obviously the pandemic started a big gun buy and everything, and then there was the rioting and everything within the black community too in California? Are people really starting to look at this as an imperative? You have to arm yourself, arm at least one person in your household, or is it still a bit of trepidation about that?
I don't think it's as widespread as it may seem to you. I can say that gun ownership in the black community, that isn't a new phenomenon. I wrote a story about this 2 or 3 years ago. Black people um, began, I won't even say began, I think it became more of a trend a few years back when African Americans realized that, they were ignoring the constitutional right by not registering um, for firearms. And I think that, we are coming to the realization that, particularly now, as times have gotten a lot more volatile than they once were. That arming yourself, especially if you have a family to protect, is critical. Um, and so gun ownership, I think, is becoming more of a trend in our community because I think um, we realize that, especially if you are living in um, areas that are plagued by poverty and crime, that owning a weapon or a firearm of some kind is pivotal. So, that's what I see.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad to hear that. And especially, I find it hilarious sometimes. There was a group, especially in Michigan, which is, right, it's a 3 hour drive from where I live. There was during the whole lockdown protest, there was a group of 5 or 6 black activists who decided to escort a black state legislator from East Lansing to the Capitol in order to, they were sort of saying, hey, white supremacists, we can get armed too, and trying to say, oh, you're hypocrites because you're going to call the police on these people. Well, in the end, nobody did call the police on them. Most people who reacted to it said, hey, this is fine by us. Absolutely. I mean, we can go to the Capitol with a bunch of rifles and so can you. Um, so yeah, I think it's great. I think I think anyone who wants to sort of learn both new firearms if they already have ones or get their first one, I think this is certainly way too late because a lot of people are buying them. They just don't necessarily have the know-how, but it's better to learn late than never learn ever.
Uh, well, you remember, if you're familiar with the Black Panther Party, I mean, again, in the '60s we were doing this,
Hmm.
right? You're talking about black people in public, um, large groups of black people, right, in public, armed with rifles. They exercise their constitutional right then. So this has been, I would say, part of black culture for a long time now. I think we're starting to see more of it because social media is more prominent now than it was 10 years ago. And so you see footage, right? And you see images of blacks with guns in public. But I don't know that it's a new thing. I just think that it's becoming more exposed. It's just magnified now because of social media.
Well, yeah, I think I agree. I certainly agree with you, and I think that was a big counterpoint to the NRA because people were saying, well, back when that happened in Sacramento, the NRA was basically Colion Noir, he's a black gun advocate. He did a video on it, saying that yeah, at the time the NRA did have a bit of willingness to actually support gun legislation because of some of the groups like the Black Panthers, which I think it's changed. I think generally people within the firearms community, they don't really care if, because a lot of them they would sell, if you're a gun vendor, you'd sell it to anyone who legally can get it, obviously. So I think like the color barrier in terms of that is basic. It's been an illusion the entire time. Like you're saying that there's always been a bit of you know, there's always been sort of this undertone that isn't spoken about in the media that there are a lot of black gun owners. Um, Getting back to the whole gender identity thing, so I was wondering what's your take on something. This was a story that I actually worked on a couple weeks ago concerning Black Lives Matter and the gay community. So I don't know if you got a chance to read that one because I sent you my latest one, but are you sort of looking at this like mating of the black activism to the gay activism because are you looking at it with trepidation too because a lot of that money that was dedicated to Black Lives Matter that was pledged to it is actually going to especially like gender identity groups within the black community, like trans activism groups. Is that something that you notice out there in California? Is it something that is of concern? Is it something you're not aware of?
Well, it's funny. Black Lives. I think they have a chapter here in Los Angeles, and I don't really see much of them. They don't make their presence known like some of the chapters in other areas of the country. Um, but I can say that the movement or the organization was launched by a group of black women, not black men, but black women. And the premise originally, I thought, uh, was that these women wanted to start a movement that would raise awareness or draw attention to police brutality, particularly against black men um, or black males. That's originally what I thought it was about. And we've seen over time that really the movement is more of a, it's either it's been hijacked by the LGBT community or it was never about black men in the first place, that they only used it as sort of a ploy to push their own agendas. And if you just, all you have to do really is observe what types of images they promote, right? Are black men used in any of the propaganda that you see them promoting? Absolutely not. I see black children, I see black women, I don't see black men. If you look at all of the instances of violence that we have seen over the years where police have killed someone, usually that someone is a black man. And so you will see protests suddenly emerge after a George Floyd or Rashard Brooks is killed, but for some reason you don't see images of black men on the covers of magazines. For example, I think Rolling Stone or Time magazine came out with something that was an image of a black woman and a child on the cover, no black man in sight.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, Sargon of Akkad talked about that.
And you see just other examples of black women being pushed to the forefront and black children, but for whatever reason, black men are ignored. And I think that it's promoting a few narratives. I think that it's empowering women as opposed to men. And as far as this gay agenda that you mentioned, absolutely, it's I think it's their intent to use this platform as a way to promote gay rights. This is activism, disguised, or rather, they're pushing this as a narrative to protect the lives of black men. When in actuality, what they're doing is sneaking. It's almost they're smuggling their own ideas, right? Knowing that they have a global platform and the attention of media all over the world. That's what they're doing right now. And I think it's very deceptive.
Well, I'll send you this article from, I think I published it in the middle of June, and basically it was a lot about really the money trail. And I'm talking about an organization called Borealis Philanthropy, and a lot of these big foundations that started to say, oh, we're going to donate to BLM back in 2015 and 16, such as the Ford Foundation and George Soros's Open Society Institute and Center for American Progress. They were pledging all this money. They didn't end up giving all the money that they pledged, but a lot of that money, believe it or not, is going directly to these organizations that often are like one person, and it's usually this, it's black. For example, one of them is called Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative, called SNAPCO, which is a black trans-led broad-based collaborative. Then another one is the Black LGBTQIA Migrant Justice Project, which obviously doesn't concern black people born here. The Marsha P. Johnson Institute protects and defends the human rights of black transgender people. And it's not this, I mean, obviously there are probably issues of black women or transgender women that, they deserve like consideration, but I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that were supposedly for the Black Lives Matter initiatives, and they ended up being diverted to these organizations. And I think in many ways this is just a money laundering scheme.
It's very possible. It's very possible. this is the whole thing. What they will tell you is that these are black lives. Doesn't matter if you're transgender, gay, bisexual, lesbian. If you're black, you're black, right? So the idea is, and again, I mentioned this earlier, Black Lives Matter. The focal point was young, or rather, black males. That was the original focal point. They've expanded that now to include transgender people, gay people, bisexual people, lesbians, right? So now they've diversified, right, their premise so that it includes more. Well, actually, it seems now it's excluding black men, and now we're seeing other groups of people being represented and advocated for, and that's it's something that is troublesome to me because it sort of dilutes the message, right? In fact, it confuses the message. If your goal, if your objective is to raise awareness and draw attention to the brutalization of black men by police, that should be the focus. There should be no deviation. But what we've seen, right, as time has progressed, we've seen them deviate from that premise, and they're including the LGBT community. You cannot combine those two groups. Number one, cops are not assaulting and victimizing gay and trans people, right? Black men, we're the ones, when this happens, we are the ones who are either being killed, beaten, or hauled to jail. So if you're going to have a movement for gay people, that should be separate from what this movement was originally supposed to be. If that's not what they're doing, the money being funneled to these various organizations is another indication this movement really there's no structure, there's no organization, there's not a central focus or a purpose. People involved in this movement are simply trying to get whatever they can, right? They're capitalizing.
Right, and I think like you know, there's like a broader issue of, poor people who get arrested by the cops. They don't necessarily have a good lawyer. And you did mention, it's mostly black men who are victimized by the cops. I do think, wasn't there the lady in Texas who she was arrested and she ended up dying in jail? I forgot her name, but she was,
Sandra Bland,
yeah,
right?
Sandra Bland. So
Yeah.
obviously there's exceptions, but by and large, yeah, you're talking about black males usually between, their teen years and their late 20s who are the subject of this issue. One of our viewers is saying, do you think all the BLM movements are Marxist? You can answer that. I have my own response.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I think I think at a very basic level, at the core, right? And I think I mentioned this before. I think the movement was created with good intentions, but anytime a movement like this is politicized, especially when you get major corporations involved, right? Then things get very, very murky. It gets very, very murky. So I think there's really no way to define it. I don't know if Marxism would be the appropriate word for it. I just think that it lacks structure and it lacks real leadership. You have a bunch of vultures now, right, jockeying for position to see who can get the most money, who can get the most attention. And now we're seeing these obscure sort of white, you can call them organizations, right, or white activist groups. They're even now starting to join and infiltrate the movement. So I really have no idea what it's even about anymore. I can't tell you.
So yeah, I'm gonna give my own response to that question, and I think Cory started to hint at it. I think that the majority. So if you're talking about the movement and its leadership, yeah, I think that they are Marxist. If you're talking about the people who go out in the streets and they go to the, they go with their placards and their canvassing houses and putting the signs on their lawns. I think those people are just a lot of clueless white people, especially where I live. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They believe all the hype. They want to be the same as everyone else. And it's in some sense it's worse than being a Marxist, because Marx himself whatever, I think he was absolutely wrong, but he was an intellectual and he had a very developed belief system. And a lot of these people are just shallow, like, bitches. That's the way I would put it. They're very insecure. They feel guilty about stuff that they didn't do. They want other people to feel guilty. They are the same type of people who think that if you're Mexican, you must have been basically used as some sort of farm implement, but then they're perfectly fine buying, lemons that were picked by migrants from the same source. They're basically like very shallow, superficial people who want to feel deeper, and that's why they participate in it, and that's what I think the majority of the movement is. Yeah, there's plenty of Marxists who are having their bright shining moment right now. I think that they're the minority of the movement because that you have this mass of people that they can swim in sort of as their ocean. I think that was actually part of, Lenin's agenda, that a lot of the revolutionary plans would be possible because there would be a lot of useful idiots, people that they would be able to use as their cover and as their as the like I said, like the water that their fish are swimming in. So that would be my answer to the question. Cory, I know that you had to go. Before we leave, are you working on a follow up to your book?
I am working on a follow up. Don't have a title. Still putting it together. I have a bit more time actually to speak, um, but I am working on a follow up. It's coming soon. Have to work out the kinks. But one more thing, just though about Black Lives Matter, though. It's just when you mentioned Marxism, right? That has a few political connotations. But I think we are giving the movement too much credit. To be honest with you, I don't know that Marxism has anything to do with it. I think you're looking at a group of people who have been convinced that they are aggrieved in some way, that the powers that be have in some way marginalized them, taking them for granted, uh, that they're oppressed in ways, um, by a white power structure that promotes and that practices, institutional racism, right, to prevent people of color from achieving in society. Of course, they believe that it trickles into, our justice system and into influences the way police interact with us as well. They think all this interwoven and interconnected. And so you have a lot of people now who are just really emotionally driven, and misinformed, and this movement is being propelled, by misinformation and hyperbole, really, sensationalism from the media, from black pundits and activists. That's really what this is. And unfortunately, people don't have the wherewithal, right, or even really just the common sense to do their research, to actually do their homework, and really study the inner workings of society. Because if they did that, they would know that oppression is not the issue in black communities at all, right? We have issues that I could go over, but it would take me probably the next hour or so if we were really to dissect these issues. And most of these issues are self-inflicted. They have nothing to do with the government, with racism, with whomever. It's self-inflicted. Um, and so within, these organizations, you have leaders, people who I think are paid, but even if they aren't paid, people who profit from the suffering and the confusion and the ignorance of the masses, particularly within the black community. That's what we have right now. And it's a problem. It's a real problem that I can only imagine will get worse as time progresses. So it's not Marxism, it's manipulation to the highest degree. That's what this is.
So you mentioned, if you have a little more time, you mentioned the cancel culture, and we've been talking about, I'm sure you heard of the Bubba Wallace story, which I think is, it's kind of funny, but I guess they fucked NASCAR permanently. Um, and then there's also these people who are saying, oh, I don't want to voice black characters. I don't want to, do like, there's the YouTubers who have said, oh, I'm going to quit YouTube. I'm sorry, everyone. Now, you obviously, let's use this for a little fun. If there was an entertainer that you think deserves to be canceled simply because they're so annoying that you would, if you had the chance, you could do it, who would it be?
That's a good question. Um, wow. No one comes to mind right now. I can't think of anyone right now. Give me some time, and I could probably come up with someone. Though.
I would say for me it's a hard choice, but I think it would have to be either like Mark Ruffalo or Sarah Silverman because they just have like that smugness to them that they're so sure that they're right, yet they're not even listening to anyone else. So I think obviously I don't really mean that I want them to be canceled because if people want to listen to Mark Ruffalo talk about how he's Captain Planet even though he's cast to be the Hulk, I guess that's fine. But I think that unfortunately they've created this cycle. These celebrities they want to make their existence more meaningful than it is because a lot of their entertainment is simply good marketing and a lot of like smoke and mirrors, and in reality they're not really the amazing people that the magazines and the Bravo TV makes them out to be. So I actually don't know where our culture is going to go from now on because they've basically poisoned everything with this philosophy. So
Well, that's the problem is this: when you try to appease too many groups of people, you end up poisoning the well of free speech. That's what has happened, right? And this may seem a bit far fetched to you, but I'm going to share with you anyway. I think um, that part of the problem is immigration. The fact that we have people from all over the world coming here. It's not as if they come here and embrace American culture. They don't adopt our traditions and values. They come with their own traditions, beliefs, and values. And what you're seeing now is a clash of everything, right? America has become very, very diverse. It really always has been, but it's more diverse now than it ever has been or ever was before. And I think a byproduct of that is social sort of confusion in the sense that you have people now who want their voices heard. They want their uh, traditions, their beliefs to be amplified. They want to be represented, um, in movies and television, right? In the different arenas, in politics, right? In sports, they want their cultures to be represented. And so everyone now is there. It's a competition. We're competing, right, for um, you know a certain, I guess you could say, status in the hierarchy. You have blacks competing. You have Hispanics. You have people from different ethnicities and backgrounds from all over the world now competing with one another. For attention, right? For sympathy, for advancement, and that's an issue. Everyone can't be represented. Everyone can't be coddled and babied. You know what I'm saying? And that's what the government, you'll see, is trying to do. That's what executives in Hollywood, television, and sports, that's what everyone's trying to do. It's like, okay, well, we're going to try to make all of you guys feel special. We're going to try to make everyone feel like they're being represented and valued. You simply can't do that. You look at other countries, they aren't diverse. They aren't. And that's why these countries, they aren't experiencing the same headaches that we are here. It's because generally their populations are full of people who believe the same things, right? Who value the same things, and that creates less confusion within those countries. You look at America, and it's like, well, it's a melting pot, but what happens when you put, let's say you were cooking a pot of gumbo or something, right? And you're just throwing ingredients in there. You're not even considering how the shit might taste when you're done. You're just throwing shit in there. That's a melting pot, is it not? You're just throwing shit in there. Well, once you're finished, then you taste what you've prepared, and it tastes like shit. That's America.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it, but I think like it's like it used to be. I would say like immigrants would come here and they would say, hey, you can't speak Polish at work, buddy, unless it was a Polish butcher shop or whatever. Nowadays, they've basically made it like, oh, it's wrong to have people vote if the ballot doesn't have Somali or Thai or whatever language it is, Spanish, Arabic on it. Like they don't expect people to adapt to here, and I would say that in Europe it is exactly like it is here. But if like I know people from India and they think it's like retarded the way that we've been doing it. They're like, well, no, in India we basically have decided now. Obviously, it was not always like this, but we're basically going to try to make India about supporting Indian people, not about being just like the everything to everybody, like you're saying. And I think a lot of other countries around the world there that's resonating there, but there is, I would say it's not just the immigration, it is the media and the support of globalist philosophy. And people would say, and they've said to me, even though I'm Jewish, they say, well, when you say globalist, you're being anti-Semitic. And I say, not really, because the globalism is this philosophy that the location that you're at doesn't really matter. It's basically like a branch of giant corporation around the world. It's like this faceless reality where people just they exchange products and services, and that's about it. There's nothing more to it. Removes all the identity and spirituality out of it, or it uses that stuff as marketing material. So that's the way I look at it. And even though I'm a capitalist and everything, I think they've basically cheapened everything, and probably in every community, whether it's the black community or Mexican or Jewish community, they've made everything into a very shallow pool of nothing.
Exactly. And you mentioned globalism. Well, what inspires globalism? Immigration,
Yeah, it's hand in
right?
hand.
Right. So it's like that's the issue. And I may seem like an asshole when I say this, but America has become too diverse. Period. We can even look just beyond ethnicity. Let's look at gender here. And now we have to deal with women wanting to sort of make up ground, from the days when they were marginalized by men in this country, right? So now women have to be considered as well, right? So beyond black people wanting their 40 acres and a mule, still holding whites today accountable for slavery, you have blacks, you have Latinos now who I imagine at some point will realize that their people are still being held in cages, you know, they're eventually going to start protesting too, because it's not like police brutality is only applicable to black people. Hispanics, they experience it as well. You have Asian people now who are probably going to come out and start sharing and airing out some of their grievances. You have so many different groups of people. You just mentioned the LGBT community. That's a whole other can of worms. Everyone right now wants to be represented. They want to be heard. They want their voices and their interests to be heard, right? How is it possible for a government to satisfy everyone? You can't do it.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous, and I think eventually, I don't know if we're looking for a better result tomorrow because I don't know the way out of this, but I do know that if this whole trend doesn't collapse soon, we're going to see a lot of bloodshed, and we're already seeing it. There were deaths at that chop over in Seattle. There was protester who killed another protester in Louisville. So, people think, they continue to portray this as peaceful protesting, but it's basically been a huge lie since the beginning, in my opinion. A lot of this stuff about the pandemic has been lies, and they're trying to resurrect it whenever I guess they feel that it's time to put a stop to people's lives. Other than that, I'll let you have the last word. Let us know exactly, where you think you're going to be focusing the next few months on, obviously with your writing and your other projects. I know you're doing a few videos too.
Yeah, well, you know what? So many things are going on right now. I think the next thing, obviously, will be the election. And I mentioned this earlier on Facebook. I said that the upcoming election will probably be the most important event in American history. And I say that because if Donald Trump is reelected, you can expect hell to break loose in this country, period.
If he loses or
Um,
if he wins.
if he's reelected, expect hell to break loose.
Hmm.
Right? People cried in 2016 when he was elected. Right? That was their reaction, tears. This time it's going to be chaos because people have truly been convinced that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. The second, that's the second coming of Hitler. People have been convinced of that. And I don't think the country can survive another 4 years under Donald Trump. Although I support him for the most part, I think that him winning in November may actually be um, a detriment to the country, not because he's unfit to be president. It's because he represents too many people. Um, he represents white supremacy. That's what people think. That's how they feel. That's what they see, and that's not going to fly.
Well, yeah, I think that this demonization, it's come, it's I've actually, the last week I saw, actually it happened, like a woman that I know, who's a black grandmother living here, who is a huge Donald Trump volunteer. She put her sign out, and the very same night it was snatched, and the people put dog shit all over her lawn and left a note on her door. So yeah, I think that certainly, they're not going to let up. And I sort of fear for, are people going to start being beat up in school because of the way their parents voted? Are
Yes.
people going to start getting kicked off of the soccer team, or the whatever, their barbershop quartet? I don't know what the fuck people are doing now, but it's retarded already. Like, people need to, learn to live a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's just they need to learn agree to disagree. The fact is, people are forgetting that we're adults. At least we're supposed to be, right? Instead, though, we're behaving like adult-sized children. I don't know when we got so sensitive. I really don't. But for the sake of future generations, we really have to start, um, getting a grip on our emotions, right? The adults in the room need to stand up and say, hey, for the sake of this country, of this nation, we need to find middle ground. I don't lean to either side, right? I'm someone who looks at everything objectively. And so I think it's really incumbent upon all of us, right, to put our egos and our pride aside and at least make an attempt, right, to find solutions or resolutions to, our differences. That's what we need to do. Otherwise, man, I don't envision this country. I don't see it surviving another 4 years of Trump. I think um, it's it's going to be probably going to resemble how it was in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. I think it's going to get to that level.
Yeah, people are talking about it being like the 1860s, like the actual Civil War.
I don't know that it'll get to that point. I don't think it'll get to that point. I hope not. I hope that we've evolved since then, right? And that There are more civilized people in this country than not. But I do imagine that just from the social climate, you can see it becoming more hostile, more volatile. And if Trump is elected, that is, I think, when we will all reach our boiling point. That's when we all fall off the cliff. And I can't predict what will happen next.
Well,
I just know the tough.
they
Yeah.
say that in the American Revolution there was the majority of people were not the majority of Americans weren't supporting the revolution. There was maybe like a third that supported it, another third were actually loyalists to the king, and then there was another third that didn't take a side. I think that you will see like there is a silent majority, but a lot of the silent majority actually doesn't care. They just care about watering their lawn and crap like that. So it is like a huge question what's going to happen. But I think that's about it for today. I obviously wish we could have figured this out like a little better first. So sorry for the delay.
All good.
I'd be glad to have you back. Potentially, if we can get you on video. And yeah, stay in touch and also stay safe out there. I know it's kind of crazy, California too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You too, man. I appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Honest.
All right, that was Cory Haywood. Obviously, wasn't the best condition at first, but that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also find me on all of these other platforms. I will let you know, of course, when I publish another article. Don't have anything coming down the pike yet. And, the video has been sort of de-emphasized lately. It just hasn't been as big of a investment for me, but have been working on some other ideas with some other people. So again, like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on all these other platforms, especially on Library. That's librarylbry.com. And I'm also on Parler. I know a lot of you are on Parler. I don't really think it's that great, but it's been really hot. So definitely subscribe there. And that's about it. Talk to you later.